been talking about digital skills for a very long time. Before the pandemic, we were talking about the fourth industrial revolution and the impact of emerging technologies on healthcare. But what we saw through the course of the pandemic was the adoption of digital technologies was rapidly accelerated because so many organizations were forced to quickly digitize their products and services. And we demonstrated unimaginable capacity for rapid transformation at that time, with many long-term plans like telehealth being rolled out in a matter of days or weeks rather than the months or even years that were planned. But it also highlighted some real issues, some real gaps. We fundamentally need access. So that covers things like affordability of data and devices, as well as infrastructure and connectivity. We need digital professionals, the people who make and manage our technology, the developers, the programmers, the data scientists. And then we need a workforce who can confidently and safely use technology. And finally, we need our patients, our citizens, to be able to use technologies too. And all of these impact the digital capacity and capability of the healthcare sector in Wales. They're all interrelated and interdependent. And so whilst this piece of work absolutely focuses on developing the digital capabilities of the workforce, we're also directly and indirectly supporting citizens to develop their skills, our workforce, our citizens, and as part of their role, they will often be helping citizens too. And then in the other direction, we're creating pathways into digital professions. So as we upskill and reskill people who are interested and are capable in a particular area. So, for example, data, we might signpost them to entry-level qualifications and a career pathway into a data role. But most importantly, we're increasing digital participation broadly, and this is the real aim, the real vision. We know from research that this leads to improved tangible offline outcomes for society, improved health, longer life expectancy, decreased loneliness and social isolation, better access to jobs and education. And as we move more and more of our government services and democratic processes online, we're also talking about voice and visibility. So the need to develop digital skills and capabilities is recognised broadly and referenced in local, national and global policies and strategies. And therefore, it's no surprise that we have fully committed to this in our planning as well. One of our strategic objectives is to lead the development and implementation of a digital capability framework for the healthcare workforce. And so I guess that's the overarching objective. But I hope I've outlined some of the real purpose as well. So what we're aiming for is a process or tool whereby individuals can understand the skills, competencies, attitudes and behaviours they need to participate fully and safely in a digital world. We want them to be able to self-evaluate using our online tool and then learn from the resources, the support, the development that we have collated in our resource repository that's mapped to the framework. And the idea is that this makes developing digital capability very accessible and actionable for individuals. And then we want them to reflect on their progress and their next steps, because this is very much about empowering people to continually develop their skills. Technology is changing all the time, and so we really need to keep ourselves informed and up to date so we can shape what happens and make good decisions. It's always important to remember that people make technology. It's not some abstract force, and it's people who make the policies that impact technology. And so it's really important that we're all informed, empowered, represented, part of the discussion. Because you are all experts at what you do. You're best placed to shape how digital works for you, for your profession, for your patients. This really builds on the tremendous amount of work already undertaken internationally around digital capabilities. So right at the beginning, we did some research, a discovery phase, if you like, a landscape review, which included reviewing 13 frameworks that the healthcare workforce are most likely to come into contact with. So thinking about the complex pathways in and out of the healthcare sector, considering education, social care, the third sector, and what's happening in other nations. Two of these frameworks, really interestingly, JISC from the education sector, which is what Health Education England use, and the EU Digital Competence Framework. These were both massive programs in their own right, and they were based on researching hundreds of other frameworks and then developing and refining over a number of years. And the interesting thing is that what they ended up with through years of separate research and development was incredibly similar. So there's a real convergence, not only in the approach, but in the frameworks themselves. So we're not starting with a blank page. We're very much building, refining, contextualizing based on these existing frameworks. And the important part is to ensure that what we produce is relevant and understandable by the healthcare workforce. And to make sure that that happened, we included representatives from the healthcare workforce throughout the programme. And so in phase one, we had representation from allied health professions and from healthcare science. And right at the beginning with that working group, we agreed some principles. So things like it has to be easy to understand, it can't take too long to carry out the self-evaluation. And then once we had the principles agreed, we moved on to organising and categorising and synthesising the different competencies from those existing frameworks. So looking for commonality and differences and having lots of useful, sometimes lively discussion on what's important, what goes where, what joins together, and what needs to be completely rewritten for the Welsh healthcare context. And then we distilled all of that into what you will be familiar with now, the digital capability framework, with 6 domains of capability, 3 subdomains in each domain, and then 3 descriptive statements describing a competency, a skill, an attitude, or behaviour. And once we got to that stage, we were also starting to collate resources mapped to the framework. Really, it's a taxonomy. It's a way of organising, grouping things together to make it all more accessible, easier to understand, and easy to cross-reference and signpost. What we're aiming for is a consensus around skills and capabilities, whilst allowing for a level of contextualisation within different roles, different professions, providing common language and structure and cohesiveness as much as possible through those complex pathways across sectors and across nations. And one of the ways we did that was working with partner organisations. So Digital Communities Wales provided the wording for the foundation skills section to ensure that it maps directly across from their inclusion work with health boards. And then we worked with other organisations like the HCW, the Centre for Digital Public Services, the Intensive Learning Academies, so that we could ensure that links to their training and support were included in the resource repository. We had a version of the framework which we turned into a proof of concept or demo version of an online self-evaluation, and we shared that link really widely, and anyone who wanted to could review it and provide anonymous feedback. And then that feedback and all the outputs from phase one informed phase two. Phase two was working with nursing, and that working group really focused on refining the wording, making sure it was really easy to understand. The idea is that the framework is motivating in as much as even if you don't know anything about that particular area or skill, capability, competency, you should still understand what is meant by it. And we hope that the wording and the examples that we use throughout actually demystify some aspects of digital. The idea is that users leave thinking, oh, I knew more than I thought I did. So, for example, you might think, oh, I don't know anything about cybersecurity, but you do know how to keep your password secure, and you do know how to report a suspicious email. So, you should leave thinking, oh, I knew more than I thought I did. Once we got to the end of phase two, then we had the version of the framework that you will be familiar with. This is the one that was launched in June 2023. We created an online toolkit in our national learning platform, Dusky. So the idea is, even if you don't know anything about the programme of work, all the information you need is in this area. There's a bit around what digital capability is and why it's important, how to use the resource, some detail around the framework, and an opportunity to self-evaluate. And when you do complete a self-evaluation, then you get a personalised summary report and links to recommended resources mapped to the framework. The whole process is confidential. It's really just for the individual to better understand and develop their own capability. But we do get anonymised data, and there's a national dashboard. So it means that going forward, we can use that information to inform our planning or to undertake targeted interventions. So if we look and we think, perhaps nursing in Cardiff and Vale needs some extra support with data literacy, then we could commission some training or create some resources specifically for that context. There are various measures within the programme, but overall the aim is to develop the digital capability of the workforce. So that is the measure of success. And in order to measure that, we need a baseline. So at the moment, we're really focused on having a statistically significant number of responses from across all health boards and across all professions. And once we have that baseline, we'll use that information to inform our planning and perhaps some targeted interventions. But really, once we have a baseline, then we can look at the digital capability in a year's time, in 2 years' time, in 3 years' time, and see where any of our interventions have had an impact and look at any particular trends across Wales.